Salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in or welcome back to Sweet Emohotion, the KSP show where we're going to take a manned mission to Moho. You can see what we're doing right here. We're sending out our little rover that has Protractor on it so we can calculate where we're going to leave for our optimum trajectory to Moho. Now, I don't know what I ended up doing here. For some reason, things did not exactly work out in the way that I wanted them to work with this thing. I apologize right now if the constant flashing of the time warp is making you a little bit dizzy. I know I sometimes have to look away. I should probably have given that warning before this started, so I apologize if I'm giving anyone seizures right now. Basically what we're doing with Protractor there is figuring out the best time of year in order to leave Kerbin in order to get a rendezvous with Moho. See, basically we're going to be using the Homan trajectory, transfer. Yes, the Homan transfer. I don't know where my brain is today. We're going to be using the Homan transfer in order to get orbit around Moho. And basically, it only really works if we're leaving on the exact opposite side of where the planet we're headed to is going to be when we get to the other side. It's a little bit complicated, but basically what you got to know is you got to have the angle that the two planets are in between each other and then take off at that time. And I ended up fudging that a little bit. I took off a little bit early and then made my final transfer orbit in the middle of space. So what I'm doing right now is escaping Kerbin orbit. And what we're doing is making full use of the Oberth effect. I wanted to show you guys how this is done. You basically set yourself on a trajectory to get yourself out of Kerbin orbit. You want a Kerbin escape. And then you're going to burn a little bit before, right to a little bit after that, that spot that you chose to leave from. You don't want to burn when you get really far out because, as we know, as I explained previously, the Oberth effect makes it so, we get the maximum efficiency out of our rockets when we're closer in to Kerbin if we are trying to escape Kerbin orbit. So what I've done right now is I've established, you can see, I've established a marker here that is going to give us a interception with Moho without a plane change. Now, I know before in an episode I said, plane change, you need to change your plane if you want to make it there. That's not entirely true. I'll see with my mouse right there, I was motioning over to Kerbin. You could still see it in the background there. It's not entirely true that you need to change your plane. It's actually a little bit more efficient if you can do it where you intercept the planet without being on the same plane. It's possible. It's a little more tough because, essentially, you need to hit that planet right around the exact point that it's at its ascending or descending node. Now here's my crew transfer vehicle. This is a meanwhile shot. So meanwhile, the other ship that's carrying my probe for landing, and that will eventually move to a crewed ship. The landing ship, it went out, and then they went out. So they will arrive quite a bit after the ship that had the lander on it. So here's my lander, and I'm going to make an orbit right now around Moho. And this is the first. I think it's my my third attempt at orbiting. And, well, I still haven't learned my lesson that I need to cut my speed a lot, and that my ship, with a thrust-to-weight ratio that's really low, well, that's just not going to cut it. So I ended up overshooting it a little bit again, but no big deal. I was able to get a pretty nice orbit here, as you can see. Next thing I wanted to do was, if you remember that fuel tank that we sort of left parked in orbit, and by left parked in orbit, I mean completely abandoned, I want to get this guy connected to that. We're going to use that fuel tank sort of as a way station because, I am pretty sure that I did all my calculations okay, that the Kerbals are going to make it easy peasy back home. But, it's better to be safe than sorry. So we're going to make sure that we get as much fuel into our return ship as possible, which, as you'll see later in the next episode, isn't exactly... Actually, I don't know that it's in the next episode. One episode after the next episode, you'll see that it's not exactly the problem that I should be worrying about. But enough of the spoilers. Here we are moving up to the probe, and, well, guess what? The only thing that has RCS on it is our lander. So we're going to have to use the lander for rendezvous with this probe. It's kind of big, and it's also kind of, it's kind of clunky, and there's no thrusters on the back there. So it's kind of funny to move around, but fortunately the new SAS that came around in the latest version of KSP, it really makes it quite a bit easier. And that, with the docking alignment indicator included, the mod that I told you about earlier, that I think everyone who's having trouble with docking, I think everyone should use this if you feel like you're having trouble with docking. That makes it a lot easier. So basically, I aligned both craft, and because I aligned both craft to essentially be at the same angle to each other, now it's really just a simple matter of driving this guy in there and, well, plugging it in. That's essentially what docking is at this point. It's as easy as plugging in a plug into the wall at night when it's dark and you can't see anything, which is a lot more difficult than some of you might think. So here I am just transferring a little fuel around, just ahead of the game a little bit. Back to our crew. They are making their burn in order to do the exact same thing that the other guy did. They are going to basically smack right into Moho. And by smack, I mean orbit. But they're going to get right into Moho without having to do a plane change maneuver. Again, efficiency's sake, this makes it so we need a lot less fuel. And as you can see, this first stage, the first two tanks that I'm using, it looks like we're just going to be over the amount of delta V that they have. So that's really good. That means that those first two that were essentially supposed to get us to Moho, they have done their job perfectly and efficiently. So they were supposed to get us to Moho, but getting home and stopping at Moho is another thing. That is going to be the first stage 1, I guess, which is sort of the second stage of this ship. That's going to be its job. So right now, we're just doing a little bit of stuff way, way further off. I'm going to bring my trajectory to a collision course with Moho, because I know that those two tanks, when I get rid of them, I want them to collide with Moho, which is important. So then after that, I'm going to set up another maneuver, and this one I've learned my lesson. I've decided that I'm just going to slow myself down way further off from Moho. Basically enough so once I get to Moho, don't really need that much fuel. But these outer tanks right here, I'm worried that while I'm in the middle of that maneuver, I may not be still in a trajectory that puts me on a collision course with Moho. So I decided, I made a decision. I decided that that extra 600 meters per second delta V was something that, well, I could probably do without. So I disconnected them and I did a little bit of Kerbal special flight here in order to get them away. What do? Well, we just smack our rocket against those two tanks like a baseball bat, sending them flinging away from our ship. So we don't have any problems in the future. You can see that flying around, and now my ship's spinning around a little bit, but we're going to get into the position that we need to get in order to perform this stopping maneuver. Now, this stopping maneuver not only does it, well, make it way easier to orbit, but it makes it a lot easier for me in order to get the exact orbit that I want. I want a polar orbit, and I want it to be basically as close to the orbiting, we'll call it a station right now, but that discarded fuel tank that we sort of left in orbit, we want it to be as close to that as possible. So after I finish that burn, I'm going to do another extra burn. That's right, you guessed it, another extra burn to burn this thing around and get us close. And wouldn't you know it, look how close we are when we come in. I wish I could say that I did this on purpose, but it was completely by accident. Our orbit, we came in right at pretty much the exact right spot to make a really efficient rendezvous with this thing. It's going to go right here, hardly any time warping needed. And as you can see, those two things, they're moving in. I just need to do one small burn to get us in here so we can come into a trajectory where we're going to be coming really close. We're going to be able to do our rendezvous, and then we'll just bring it in and, essentially do our docking that we would normally, dock. So here we come in. This is essentially they're coming in here to connect. This is the first time the Kerbals have seen the surface. They're coming up to the Moho lander and the junk station, the two that are connected to each other. And as they come in to dock with each other, I've realized that guess who didn't put RCS on this thing? Yeah, that's right. I didn't put RCS on hardly anything because, well, with our reaction control wheels, we don't really need any RCS, really. We have the reaction control, can move us around everywhere. RCS, it's just heavy and inefficient. So heavy and inefficient, we are still going to use it to move the whole station, which that's not a big deal because our lander, it does need a little bit of RCS. I decided, I put some RCS all around it. No problem. We can use that RCS to bring us in and give us a docking with this thing. And we're going to be docking in the dark. Sorry about that. I know it can be sort of hard for some of you to see on YouTube. I did put some lights on the lander because I knew we would be landing in the North Pole, which would probably be in some shadows. So here we come docking in the night side. It's the first night the Kerbals have seen on Moho, and here we see their very first sunrise on Moho. And with that, our Kerbals are safe and sound on there. They're going to take a quick look out the window down to see. Look, there is Moho below. Out their space. Kerbin's way out there, and he turns to his buddy over here and he says, "Hey man, we're going down there tomorrow." So with that, I leave you. Thanks for watching, everybody, and as always, stay entertained.